The text came the night before the party. "Hey sis. Sorry, venue's not very big. We're only taking a handful of invites. Hope you understand." My brother always did know how to twist the knife and make it seem like a joke. I stared at the message, stunned. The venue I booked, the food I paid for, the celebration I planned, and I wasn't invited. I called my dad immediately, heart pounding harder with every ring. He picked up after the third. That moment felt surreal, like stepping onto a stage where everyone else knew their lines except me. A party I'd poured so much time and money into was effectively canceling me. The phone rang in my ear like a countdown to some cosmic punchline I didn't find funny. I'd been planning this event in secret for months, feeling both excited and nervous, determined to show my father how much I cared despite our rocky history. But before I could explain my confusion, I heard his voice on the other end. There was no warmth, no hint of apology. My hand trembled, thumb pressing the phone tight against my ear. In that split second, it struck me how much power they still had to hurt me. "It's just a small gathering," he said casually. "We ran short of seats at the last minute, nothing personal." He sounded almost bored, like I hadn't been coordinating with the event planner for months, like I hadn't quietly paid for everything under an alias so I could surprise him in front of everyone with a $1 million retirement gift. A house. His dream house, paid in full, titled in his name, until that night. I sat there holding my phone, fighting the urge to scream. I wanted to say, "Dad, I know the venue capacity. I booked it myself. I know how many seats there are because I personally chose the table arrangement, and I know who wrote all the checks for the food and decorations. Me." But my voice froze, wedged between my disbelief and the familiar fear that I'd just be dismissed again. He offered no gratitude for my efforts, no recognition of the investment, financially and emotionally, I had made. In that instant, the lines blurred between heartbreak and anger. I realized that he and my brother must have made this decision together, like they always did. Even my own father was siding with him, and as I hung up, my heart pounded with a bitter understanding. I wasn't welcome. That phone call ricocheted me back to the first major rift I ever had with Dad. I was 23 and had just landed my first big finance job, a position with a respected investment firm in the city. I remember the pride I felt, a swelling in my chest that said, "Finally, I'm on my way." But that was the same week Dad took me aside and said, "I've been thinking, you should buy me a car, a really nice one." His eyes glinted with expectation, the way they always did when he wanted something from me. I was fresh out of college, carrying student loans even though I had a decent job. The paycheck was good, but not "buy your dad a luxury car" good. I told him gently that it was too big a purchase for me then. His expression changed so quickly, like shutters slamming over a window. He nodded but never really spoke to me about it again. Later I heard from relatives that he was calling me stingy behind my back. He felt entitled to any success I had. From that moment on, there was a cold distance between us, a bruise on our relationship that never quite healed. Even so, I kept trying. Dad's car request stung partly because it wasn't a congratulatory pat on my back. "No, I'm proud of you," or "you worked so hard." It was just an immediate demand, a test of whether I was willing to open my wallet for him. And when I gently declined, he saw it as a personal betrayal. I'd hoped he'd understand the financial reality of a recent grad. Instead, he took it as proof that I was ungrateful. His resentment solidified like stone. He never said it outright, but I'd catch the little barbs during family gatherings or from overhearing phone conversations. "She's got money now, but she won't share," he'd mutter. "Thinks she's better than us." His eyes would flick toward me with a spark of anger, or he'd conveniently step out of the room whenever I arrived, as if my presence irritated him. The sad thing was, all I really wanted was his acknowledgement, his love, or just a simple congratulations. But instead I became the scapegoat. Everything I did was either too little or too late. It hurt me more than I cared to admit, but I swallowed it down, thinking that someday I'd prove my generosity in a way he couldn't deny. Even with the wedge that grew between us, I continued to support my family whenever I could. It was never flashy. I was careful, discreet. Every month, I'd send a small deposit to my mom's bank account to help with groceries and utilities. She insisted they didn't need it, but I always felt better knowing I was contributing in a tangible way. Sometimes when my younger cousins needed help with school fees, or when the family car broke down unexpectedly, I'd step in and cover the costs without telling Dad. He had too much pride, or maybe it was a complex sense of entitlement that would get bruised if he knew I was offering help. So I told my mom to keep it between us. She told me I was kind, that I had a good heart. But that wasn't why I did it. Deep down, I felt indebted. I wanted my family to see that I wasn't the stingy monster Dad made me out to be. This continued for years, even though Dad and I barely spoke. He never asked where the extra money came from. He must have known it was me, but he never acknowledged it. Silence was our uneasy truce. While I was sending money home, I was also living frugally in the city. My apartment was modest, barely big enough for myself and my stacks of paperwork. I skipped vacations, learned to cook at home instead of eating out, and shopped sales religiously. My goal was simple: save as much as I could. Not just for me, but for the possibility that one day I could do something truly meaningful for my family. Something that would show Dad I wasn't the selfish daughter he'd painted in his mind. Every sacrifice felt worth it when I checked my bank balance and saw the incremental growth. I wasn't a millionaire overnight, but I was disciplined and strategic with my investments. It was oddly satisfying to watch my money multiply, to know I had full control of my finances. In those solitary moments, I allowed myself to dream of a grand gesture, something that would redeem me in my father's eyes, maybe even bring us closer. I never bragged about my savings or investments. I kept my head down, worked hard at my firm, rose through the ranks, and quietly planned for the day when I could give Dad the biggest surprise of his life. That day was closer than he realized. When Dad announced his retirement, I felt a surge of excitement. Despite our distance, I saw it as my chance to finally bridge that gap. I'd always wanted to give him something monumental, something that would erase all his doubts about my loyalty. Over the years, as my savings grew, I'd toyed with several ideas, but nothing felt big enough. Then I found the property listing. A beautiful luxury mansion on the outskirts of town, complete with lush landscaping, a swimming pool, and a wide porch with a view of rolling hills. I remembered him mentioning, back when things were good, how he dreamed of a house away from the noise, somewhere peaceful to spend his golden years. It was everything he'd ever described. I told myself this was it. I arranged for a discreet purchase, funneling money through a trust so no one would catch on. The plan was elaborate and hush-hush. I wanted the reveal to happen in front of the entire family at his retirement party. A grand surprise that would show everyone, especially Dad, just how much I cared. I imagined the shock on their faces, the tears in his eyes. For a moment, I let myself believe it would fix everything. I also wanted that retirement party to be unforgettable, so I booked a swanky venue, a historic estate with a ballroom and a manicured garden. It was large enough to hold our extended family and all of Dad's close friends, old colleagues, and neighbors. I hired a top-tier catering service to serve gourmet food, complete with an open bar and a small jazz quartet for live music. No expense was spared, because this was meant to be the pinnacle of my heartfelt gesture. To keep it under wraps, I used a third-party event planner, paid entirely from one of my subsidiary accounts. I never signed my real name. I instructed everyone involved to keep the identity of the sponsor secret, with the explanation that this was a gift from an anonymous benefactor who valued my father's years of service. Looking back, maybe I was being naive, trusting that everything would fall into place perfectly, like in some feel-good movie. But I was determined. The idea was simple. On the night of the party, once all the toasts were made, I'd step forward and present the deed to his brand new house. That moment would be the grand finale, the healing salve for years of misunderstandings, or so I thought. In my head, I pictured how it would unfold. The speeches would start. Co-workers reminiscing about Dad's early days, family friends telling stories of his generosity, my brother making some half-serious, half-joking remarks that would soften Dad's usual stern exterior. Then, at the very end, I'd ask for everyone's attention. My heart would pound, but I'd stand tall, clear my throat, and unveil the surprise. The hush in the room would be tangible. Dad's eyes would go wide. My brother would drop his jaw. I'd say something like, For all you've done for us, despite our ups and downs. This is my way of showing you how much I love you, Dad." Maybe we'd share an emotional hug. Tears glistening under the chandelier lights, everyone cheering. I know it sounds a bit dramatic, but that was my honest vision. I wanted to prove myself not through fancy words or empty apologies, but with a concrete demonstration of gratitude. And I hoped that moment would finally close the painful chapter of me being labeled the stingy daughter. The magnitude of this gift would leave no room for doubt or resentment, I believed. In my fantasy, it was a perfect fairy tale reconciliation scene. I also hoped that this retirement gift would be an olive branch for my brother and me. Despite everything, I loved him. Growing up, we were close, sharing jokes and dreams, until the day my success became a wedge. It wasn't just Dad who changed when I got that finance job. My brother began looking at me like I was competition. He'd accuse me of thinking I was better than him, or say things like, "Don't forget where you came from." Over time, he learned to jab me with sarcasm. But maybe I thought, when he saw me hand over the deed to Dad's dream house, he'd realize I wasn't the cold, calculating sister he'd made me out to be. I'd fantasized about him giving me one of those playful nudges, telling me I'd outdone myself. We'd hug and laugh, the years of tension dissolving in that single moment. Yes, I was that hopeful. Because sometimes, your family is your weak spot. You keep holding out hope that one grand gesture will make them see who you really are. This party was supposed to be my redemption, my big reveal, my chance to finally banish all the old grudges. Clearly, I misjudged everything. Instead, the night before the party, I got that text from my brother, basically telling me, "You're not invited." It felt like a punch in the gut. Once Dad confirmed it with his casual dismissal, my chest tightened in rage and heartbreak. For so long, I'd believed my role in the family was overshadowed by Dad's perception that I was selfish. So I'd worked tirelessly behind the scenes, hoping to rewrite that narrative. And here they were, excluding me from the very celebration I'd orchestrated. It wasn't just about the event itself. It was the principle. I'd spent hours ensuring every detail was perfect, all to honor a father who had barely acknowledged me in the last few years. I had put so much of my heart, and let's be real, my money, into a night that was meant to be a turning point. And with one phone call, Dad crushed any hope that I'd be standing by his side. Part of me wanted to drive straight to his house, wave the receipts in his face, and demand an explanation. But deep down, I knew that only confirmed the narrative that I was petty. So I bottled it all up, let the tears come, and braced myself for what would follow. What hurt the most was the realization that my own father didn't see me as worthy of a seat at the table, even when it was my table to begin with. Year after year, I'd made excuses for him, telling myself he was old-fashioned or just proud, that maybe I needed to demonstrate my love in ways he'd understand. But this exclusion proved that in his eyes, I was still the daughter who had disappointed him years ago by not buying that car. I thought about how many times I'd sacrificed little joys to save money for my ultimate gift, how many late nights I'd worked extra hours, how many times I'd endured snide remarks from colleagues who assumed I had no social life because I was always at the office. Yet none of that mattered now. My father didn't even pretend to want me there. I didn't just feel rejected. I felt invisible. To them, I was a resource to exploit when convenient, but never someone to celebrate or respect. It was a painful reminder that no matter how far I'd come, my worth in the family still felt overshadowed by old grudges. And there was no seat left for me. On the night of the party, I stayed at my apartment. Instead of the elegant dress I'd bought, I wore sweatpants and a faded t-shirt. I ordered takeout from my favorite Thai place and opened a cheap bottle of red wine. Every bite tasted oddly bitter, not because the food was bad, but because I kept imagining the grand ballroom I'd reserved, filled with guests who had no idea I'd footed the entire bill. I pictured the perfectly set tables, white linens, crystal glassware glinting under soft lights. I thought of the caterers circulating with canapes and champagne. The band might be playing something jazzy and upbeat, while Dad and my brother mingled without a care in the world. Would they even notice my absence? Probably not. Or maybe they'd mention me in passing, making jokes about how I was too busy to attend. Halfway through my meal, I couldn't help but laugh. a sharp, hollow sound that startled even me. I was the invisible benefactor, the secret sponsor of a party I wasn't important enough to join. There was something darkly poetic about it, a layer of irony I almost admired. Almost. I sat there, swirling my wine, feeling both hurt and strangely liberated. It struck me that I could have crashed the party if I really wanted to. I had every legal right to show up at the venue I'd paid for. But something in me refused. I didn't want to beg for a spot. If Dad and my brother made a conscious choice to exclude me, then so be it. Perhaps it was my way of reclaiming a shred of self-respect. So I spent the evening alone, alternating between fits of laughter and bouts of anger. I let myself imagine their faces if I had walked in with the deed, announcing that I was the reason the entire event was even possible. Then again, I thought about how Dad would probably dismiss it, or how my brother might twist the narrative to make me look like the bad guy. When the wine finally kicked in, I felt a wave of acceptance wash over me. Maybe I was done trying so hard to be the good daughter. Maybe I was just exhausted from the endless cycle of striving for their validation. I let the tears flow freely, knowing that come morning, I'd need to decide what to do with my carefully orchestrated $1,000,000 surprise. Early the next day, my cousin Layla called me in a panic. She's one of the few in the family I genuinely trust, someone who doesn't carry hidden agendas. "I heard the wildest story last night," she began breathlessly. Apparently, during the retirement party, rumors had started swirling. A few guests noticed how extravagant the affair was, and how Dad's explanation, "It's just a small gathering," made no sense given the lavish surroundings. Soon, word got around that the entire event was paid for by an anonymous benefactor, and speculation ran rampant. Then someone discovered that the mansion I'd secretly purchased for Dad was in the process of being furnished. My name popped up in some legal or logistical detail that wasn't fully concealed. And once one person knew, it spread like wildfire. By the end of the night, half the attendees were whispering that I was the real host of the party, and that I'd bought Dad a dream house too. Layla said people were furious at how I'd been shut out. Some relatives who barely spoke to me were suddenly outraged on my behalf. "How could they not invite you, after all you did?" she kept repeating. I could hear the disbelief in her voice, and a faint stirring of vindication in my chest. Layla also mentioned the shock on Dad's face when he realized the truth. She didn't see his initial reaction, she only heard about it secondhand from a friend who overheard my brother frantically explaining something to him. Apparently, once my dad pieced it together, he looked like someone had pulled the ground out from under him. It was chaos. People started asking him why I wasn't there, if we'd had a falling out. Suddenly, Dad and my brother were on the defensive, trying to downplay the situation as if it was just a misunderstanding. According to Layla, the event ended on a sour note. Some guests left early, offended by the family drama. Others stuck around to gawk at Dad's discomfort. I could practically see him fuming, realizing he'd essentially enjoyed a lavish retirement celebration paid for by the daughter he'd excluded. For a moment, I felt a pang of pity, but it was overshadowed by a sense of poetic justice. I thanked Layla for filling me in. She encouraged me to pick up the phone when people started calling and to set the record straight. But I just couldn't face talking to any of them yet. I told her I'd think about it, my mind already spinning with the next step. Sure enough, by lunchtime, my phone was lighting up non-stop. Dad called 3 times in a row. Then my brother texted me, "We need to talk. Call me, please." Several aunts and uncles joined in, leaving voicemails about how the party had gone awry, how everyone was suddenly gossiping about me, about the house, about Dad's decision to exclude me. The collective tone was frantic, part apology, part confusion. My father left a voicemail. "Look, we need to discuss what happened. I had no idea. Well, I mean, it's complicated. Can we meet?" He sounded uncharacteristically nervous, like he was finally aware of how deeply he'd messed up. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened to another from him, recorded just minutes later. His voice was quieter this time. "I'm sorry, I really am. I didn't realize. You know how things can get mixed up. Please call me." For years, I'd longed to hear any admission of regret from him, but now it felt hollow. He was only apologizing because the truth had come out. The seat he'd taken from me was always mine. But he only noticed the injustice once he looked bad in front of the entire family. The flood of messages continued. My brother's texts evolved from curt demands, "Call me now," to pleading remarks. "Sis, I really didn't mean for this to happen. Dad said we had to keep it small. I was just going along with him. Please, let's straighten this out." Aunts started rambling about how they'd told Dad it was a bad idea to exclude me, that they'd had no idea I was funding everything. It was almost funny. The very people who rarely showed concern for me were tripping over themselves to get on my good side. The news of the mansion had evidently sealed the narrative. I wasn't the stingy daughter after all. On the contrary, I was the one who went above and beyond. In one night, the entire script flipped. I felt a swirl of emotions, part satisfaction, part sadness, a dash of bitterness. I'd spent years craving their respect, and now it was pouring in like a broken faucet. But the circumstances made it feel tainted, transactional. They wanted to salvage their own reputations in the aftermath of the drama. Nobody was concerned about my feelings before they found out I held the purse strings. That truth stung more than ever. Instead of responding to them, I did what any composed adult with resources would do. I called my lawyer. I explained the entire situation, from the hush-hush purchase of the mansion to the abrupt realization that my family neither respected nor valued me. The lawyer was straightforward, telling me that since the final deed transfer hadn't been fully executed in Dad's name yet, I still had legal control. The gift was not officially complete. There was a grace period for final signatures. "Then let's halt it," I said, my voice calm but resolute. I'd put too much time, money, and heart into a grand gesture that no one truly appreciated. I asked for the process to be reversed so the property would remain mine. If Dad wanted a house, he'd have to buy it himself. In that moment, I wasn't being vindictive for the sake of cruelty. I was protecting my own dignity. I ended the call and felt an odd sense of relief, like a weight had lifted. For so long, my identity in this family had been tied to proving something to Dad. But now I realized I didn't owe him this grand display, especially not after he'd so blatantly shunned me. Once the legal wheels were in motion, I sat back and watched the calls and messages roll in. I didn't pick up. I didn't text back. I just let them stew in their realization. For years, they'd seen me as a convenient checkbook, someone who could fund a party, pay for a broken car, or bail out a cousin's tuition. But when it came to celebrating me, or even just including me, I was treated like an afterthought. Now, with the knowledge that I was about to give Dad $1 million mansion, they suddenly remembered I existed. Their flurry of remorse and excuses felt shallow. Dad's voicemails hinted at how he'd made a mistake, how he'd do anything to fix this, but the damage was already done. I wasn't even sure I wanted it fixed anymore. There's a certain power in silence, in not rushing to soothe everyone else's conscience. I was letting them feel the awkward, painful truth of what they'd done, excluding me from my own event. If they wanted to face me, they'd have to do it on my terms, and I wasn't in any hurry. The house was no longer his retirement gift. It was just another asset in my expanding portfolio. As I processed everything, my mind drifted back over the years of feeling small and unworthy. Growing up, I'd always been cautious around Dad, tiptoeing, hoping to earn his approval. Whenever I achieved something, be it academic or career-related, he'd say, "That's nice, but," and point out what I hadn't done yet. It was like running on a treadmill that never stopped. I realized now that my silence in the face of his criticisms wasn't weakness, it was survival. I kept my head down, studied hard, built a life I could be proud of, all while he cast me as the villain. Yet, ironically, I was the one who carried the family's financial burdens, quietly giving more than anyone else. The sum of these contradictions crystallized into a simple truth. I didn't need to prove my worth anymore. The phone kept buzzing, each vibration a reminder of how quickly people switch tunes when they realize what they stand to lose. I allowed myself a moment of grim satisfaction. I wasn't the nobody they thought. I was, in fact, the one with power, and I didn't need their permission to claim it. For once, I felt truly free from their expectations. I took a day off work just to let it all sink in. I made a cup of tea and sat by my window, watching the city skyline. I reflected on how far I'd come from the anxious young woman who wanted so desperately to be seen by her father. Back then, every move I made was about winning his praise or changing his mind about me. But somewhere in the hustle of building my career, I'd grown beyond his reach. I'd become someone stronger, someone who knew how to stand alone. I thought about how Dad once accused me of not giving enough. It was laughable now. In reality, I'd given him more than he ever realized. My time, my emotional energy, my financial resources. I'd sacrificed my own comfort just to keep him afloat, to keep the family afloat. And how had he repaid me? By locking me out of my own party. Let him and the rest stew in their regrets. My silent withdrawal wasn't about punishing them. It was about honoring myself. The house belonged to me, and so did my peace of mind. If they wanted a relationship going forward, they'd have to do the work. I was done chasing their approval. Over the next few weeks, I visited the mansion once or twice, just to confirm that everything was in order and that the reverse deed paperwork was finalized. The property was stunning. Big windows letting in cascades of light, the smell of freshly polished wood floors, and a view that made the horizon look endless. Once I stood in the empty foyer and imagined how it would have felt to hand this place over to Dad with a big red bow. For a moment, regret tugged at me. I'd wanted so badly to see his face light up with gratitude, to share in that moment of familial love. But then I recalled how easily he'd dismissed me. I reminded myself that buying love doesn't work. Real love includes, it celebrates, it respects. If Dad couldn't even invite me to his retirement party, would he really cherish a house from me? Or would it just fuel more strange power dynamics, more unspoken resentments? Walking through the sunlit rooms, I let go of the fantasy. This mansion was a grand symbol of a hope that died the moment I realized my father wouldn't spare me a seat at his table. Now, it was simply another property in my portfolio, a testament to my own resilience. My family continued to reach out, but I kept my responses polite and distant. I wasn't cruel. I just didn't have the energy to navigate their sudden contrition. My aunts wrote lengthy apologies, citing misunderstandings and poor communication. My brother tried calling at least once a week, leaving voicemails about how much he missed me, how we needed to fix things for Dad's sake. Dad's own messages were a tangled mess of half-baked apologies and justifications. You know how your brother can be. Or I didn't mean for you to feel unwelcome. I never blamed them for being human, for having flaws, for making mistakes. But I had reached a point where the repeated cycles of hurt and disappointment no longer felt worth enduring. At least not without some tangible change on their side. So I let their words hang unanswered, giving them space to reflect. I wasn't slamming the door, I was just not rushing to open it. In the meantime, I focused on me, my work, my well-being. I realized how much energy I'd funneled into pleasing my family. Taking a step back, I felt lighter, as if all the anger and sadness had somewhere else to go now, somewhere that wasn't inside me. Looking back, I realized I was never the selfish one. I gave what I could, often more than was healthy, hoping to earn acceptance. Yet, no matter how much I offered, it seemed like it would never be enough. My dad and brother wanted me to perform success on their terms, lavish gifts when they demanded, unwavering compliance when they decided. But true success, I've learned, isn't about showing off or bending to someone else's idea of worth. It's about finding peace within yourself. By walking away from that toxic dynamic, I claimed a new kind of power. My silence was my silent revenge, an acknowledgement that I didn't need their validation to be whole. I gave Dad a chance for a grand retirement gift, and he chose to exclude me instead. So I gave that gift back to myself, reversing the deed and keeping the house in my own name. I became quietly unstoppable, unshackled from the need for their approval. I still carry love for my family, but now I recognize I can love them without diminishing myself. In the end, my greatest victory wasn't the mansion or the party. It was reclaiming my self-worth. And that, more than any grand gesture, is the legacy I choose to live by.